When we started this company, we had a big question. How can a Dominican kid who grew up with a single mom in an attic in Queens connect with a senior executive of 20 years from a Fortune 500 company who lived in high-rise? How can they connect?
Or, how does a Latina woman who grew up in St. Louis, in a town surrounded by racial tension, connect with the CEO of a tech company?
Work is where we spend most of our time. So there's this need to come together, connect across difference. And that's what Forefront is really about, bringing everyone to the forefront. We develop a proprietary method called Forefront Cultures. Forefront Cultures is really about teaching inclusive leadership skills.
Hello, my name is Josuel Plasencia. I'm the co-founder and COO of Forefront, and we support the next generation of talent to have the resources and skills and relationships they need to succeed.
Hello, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's really, really great to see you, to have this critical conversation, digging into the space.
Oh my God, no, absolutely. I mean, this is like my catch-up time. I haven't seen you in forever. And even before the pandemic, I haven't seen you in forever. So yeah. This is like really, really wonderful. And so I literally I always want to jump into so many different things, but before we jump into anything that you're doing, I want people to know, where are you? What do you, your story, who are you before the entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, I was born and raised in Queens, New York. My parents were Dominican immigrants. They are like so many Americans, so many people came here in economic asylum, right? Pursuing, this quote unquote opportunity. So I was part of the wave of Dominican immigrants that we saw around 30 plus years ago. And in New York, my dad, just when I was a few years old, was unfortunately incarcerated for a minor offense, later deported. My mom raised me by herself, working minimum wage jobs. But my childhood was a good one because I was going to school. I felt safe, public schools. And then, that was really the start of me understanding and getting familiar with some of the opportunities that have placed me where I am today, and bring me and inspire me, but also alert me of some of the challenges that we have. That's the quick version of how everything started.
Well, the fun part is we have time. We don't have to do quick here. It's like we get to dig a little bit deeper. So, do you have siblings?
I do. I have a little sister who was born in 2011. Then I have a second sister in 2013 from both my parents. One here in the States, and one in the Dominican Republic. As you know, as I just said, my dad unfortunately had to move or go back to put it in simpler terms to the Dominican Republic.
Well, let me just start there. So, how old were you again when your dad got deported?
I was just a few years old. I was 3, 4. It was really, when I think that when I look at my youth and I reflect on it and put it into context, I think that for a lot of times when we look at young people or young Latinos or young poor people, or young poor people of color, that was me, or folks that were raised by a single mother, on food stamps and Section 8 and all of this, we tend to think of this crazy, terrible experience, and I must say, I think on the record, and then I'm saying this probably for the first time on the record, I was not exposed to or came across knowing someone or that had access to, say, hard drugs until I went to the bushy, beautiful campus of Babson. So, I had a very nice childhood, and it was very family oriented. It was very, very beautiful. And unfortunately, when we depict a lot of these experiences, we misjudge them. We make assumptions. But I had an incredible childhood. Um, and it's, ironic because a lot of times we don't really think of that, of low income communities as being safe and being full of love. And that's what I had.
Well, I think that's one of the things that you just mentioned that people don't pay attention to. Your father got deported. You didn't mention that you weren't able to see your father. You just said you have two younger sisters and the community of family. Your family didn't get deported. I mean, like I go, so that's one of the things that people just assume, the assumption of, oh, his father got deported, he automatically should go into drugs. You just mentioned the community.
Yeah, exactly. So exactly, and I was very much in touch with him, and I was very much, I have a relationship to this day with him. It has been really striking, because we placed a lot of, like I said, it's almost like a stereotype, like, oh, there's these communities, low income. I don't want to live there. I don't want to go there. It's unsafe. It's a bad place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just a terrible, terrible thing. When some of those things happen, like I said, in affluent communities, we don't see the same way, and they do, and in my case, I was exposed to more dangerous things in a more safer community. I'm not trying to say, I felt unsafe in college or anything like that, but that was that's where that's where I saw a lot of the things that you might hear in the media you were expected to see in Queens, New York. Um, and that is a thing I'm passionate about. You hear a lot of people talk about different cities, and there's in different places in those cities, and sometimes there's a little bit of racism in that. Um, so that's one phenomenon that I've seen in growing up.
In regards to you're being raised by a single mom in the States, different language, different culture, different way of doing everything. You are learning English faster. I mean, you're learning right from the get-go. I mean, you are a bilingual child, but you're learning English from the start. I mean, I'm first generation, learned how to speak English when I was younger. Was the translator. I took care of my grandmother. I was a translator where everywhere we went, I had to translate because my grandmother's like, I don't want to learn English. It's a silly language. And so I had to be that translator for her. So how was it for you where I always felt that I was in Haiti in my home, in the house, and the second I walked outside, I was in America. So it's like the dual world. So how was it for you growing up, being a single mom, and it's just like you're living a dual world?
Yeah, I gotta say that, and this is why I'm very concerned about what has been happening in the last few years in this country, because I try to think about my sister's experience right now in school, and it seems to be mostly positive in her, kind of in terms of her feeling included and being feeling in an inclusive environment. She's in the fourth grade. But when I think about my experience in school, in particular, my friendships in my community, as like you said, a son of immigrants, someone who was kind of in this immersion of worlds, it worked out really well because I grew up in one of the most racially diverse in terms of when you look at ethnic and cultural places in the world, in Queens, New York. And then I was going to school with people from all over the world. And, sure, there's been, there's racism and sometimes implicit racism and a lot of homophobia and implicit remarks. I was a kid in a time where anything that was a that was a bad thing. It was like, oh, that's gay, or this is gay, or that's gay. So that, that happens. I'm sure it's still happening, maybe less, I'm not sure. And whatnot, stuff like that was happening. But overall, I felt it's safe. I wasn't, turning on the TV and seeing, someone of authority saying, hey, your people are bad people, or your people are drug dealers. I mean, keep in mind, my dad was deported when Rudy Giuliani was a mayor, so there's that. But I didn't feel it. I didn't feel it in my day to day. So yeah, I think it was a positive experience, and I think unfortunately somehow that's under threat. And I think that my there's just something to be said about having schools where people from all over the world are welcomed and made sure that that's okay. And I don't know what my experience would have been if I was outside of a city. Can't speak to that, but I felt very comfortable, and I think to an extent those are some of the nice things about a city too. And the access to so many cultures, and the feeling that it's okay to be who you are and participate in that. So it wasn't really an issue as a kid. I think as I look back, I see some challenges around more socioeconomic, policy stuff. But personally, I had a good experience.
I have to say that uh, I find that, and I mean, I still see that parents that come from other countries. Remember, I mean, like, so my parents were super, super crazy strict. When you're younger, you're like, oh my God, I can't celebrate Halloween. I can't go to a friend's house. I can't do anything. As you get older, you realize it's not that they wouldn't want us to participate. It's the fear of not understanding the culture and what's happening here. And so that being strict and not letting your child do things is because I don't know what I'm saying yes to. So I'm going to say no. Let's just go the safer bet. And so I'm going to dive in. So I'm definitely going to take this conversation out of order. We are seeing, I mean, with the children that have been separated from their parents, we are seeing individuals that are at a loss where I can't take care of my children. I'm not getting paid properly to be able to take care of my children. My children are seeing this, and then it's the adoption of, I'm the next generation of this circumstance that we're in, not being given the opportunity, not being given the mentorship, not being able to see what the possibilities are because of their circumstances. So with all of that, the way that you were raised, I mean, what are your thoughts overall? Like, you were raised the way you were, I was raised the way I was. We're both immigrant kids, but I mean, like, how do you see the world evolving for us to get together with a global? I mean, so like I always say to people, I hate the comment of the melting pot. I don't want the melting pot. I want my salad. I want to know where my tomatoes are. I want to know where my cucumbers are. I want to know where my arugula is. I want to know you. I don't want you to just blend in. So with all these different things coming up in this world, and when we were younger, it's all about coming to America for the American dream, to escape where you are from. And now you're seeing how other countries are seeing us. They're like, it's bad in our country, but is it any better in the United States for our families? What are your thoughts about all of it? So it's such a loaded question, but what are your thoughts from the way that you were raised, the way that your siblings are being raised, and the world is dramatically, there's a gap between you and your sisters. So what are your thoughts about where we are now, and what do you see it going forwards for the younger populations that are just coming into this country?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question around the role of parents and also how do you assimilate or not assimilate and participate in your community or this country as an immigrant. And I'll kind of try to jump around some of the things that you said for that example that you gave of the parents and this idea that, hey, you shouldn't go to this party or shouldn't do this or shouldn't do that. It's interesting. I do think that there's I see what you're saying around the some of it being, hey, the unknown, the fear of that. And that's a great point. I like that. I think you need to make a very calculated decision, because when you take a culture or a community and you are exposing yourself to potential changes, say, it could be hard. It could be very difficult because things can go well, things can go wrong. And I think you see that with the Latino community. I think assimilation in the Latino community, we've seen examples of that where it's been great. It's been there's been some great collaborations, but then you also see times where I mean, I can't believe we're in a place where there's a simulation into hate sometimes as well, and we see that. So I love that example, and I do think that we need to have those difficult conversations when it comes in terms of that immigrant and transient culture that we're in. The other thing I would say, though, which is really, that's one kind of category and one reality, which is that I just said. But in another one, in the same coin, we need to think about where it comes from, where that remark or that action by your parents come from. Because for me, I was super lucky, but I do think it's a little bit of the male privilege and that I had, in that I was really let go and really, I think that I think at 12 or 13 or maybe even younger, I was already allowed to be out late and be with friends and kind of see the world. And that actually, again, I think it's a male privilege thing, but I think that really afforded me to see the world and understand the world and be exposed. And what we have is a lot of first generation students who are 17, 18, who are, I'll use Queens, for example, who are in Queens or, whatever, say Roxbury. And instead of, taking a flight, and in my case, going to Babson, going to Boston, so they can see the world, which is kind of tied to my point earlier of seeing some things I had not seen any place before. See the world. A lot of times, this is we see them unfortunately staying back. That influence of you shouldn't go too far away. You should be with family. You should stay here. And unfortunately, that is one of the challenges, right? We see that in corporate America as well, with a lot of and now and you see that in the Latino community, Latino professionals stepping back to support family, whether that's a mother, a son, a child, and we need to have a complex conversation about that. And I think sometimes gender has to do with that too. And in my case, I was so lucky. I was me going from New York to Boston. Well, some of it was that male privilege. Some of that was having somewhat progressive parents that allowed me to do that. So what I'm saying to you, Jodi, is can we have that progressive outlook of our children, our next generation, but at the same time have conversations with them when we expose them to say, hey, there's some bad out there that you're going to see, and be careful because, hate is still around and and demographic shifts are going to happen.
Well, it's so funny. So my silly experience, I mean, I call it silly now, but at the time it was not. I wanted to go to University of Southern California, and my parents were like, we chose Massachusetts because there's so many universities, colleges, there's no need for you to go anywhere else. And I was like, I wanted to leave the state. You were raised here, but you wanted to leave. And the Haitian bubble is very tight, as the Dominican bubble. We're in bubbles of our culture, of our family, and they don't want to let us go because they are working so hard to be here. They don't want anything to happen to you.
Right.
So I couldn't go to University of Southern California, but I got into University of Houston. So I was like, boom, I'm out of here. And the funny thing was, that was the first time that I ever experienced racism in regards of, I was in Texas, I was in Houston, the South, which of course, in my mind, I literally was just so oblivious to like a lot of things. I was like, woohoo, beautiful.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I would have conversations with people like, shut up. You don't like me for my skin color. Are you freaking kidding me? Is that real? So that bubble is great to a point.
Yeah.
When you were at Babson, you experienced things. For me, when I went to Texas, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like I thought this was just in movies.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. It's so tied to my experience, and it's funny because the whole concept of a bubble and
Yeah.
me, like I just said, we started this interview by saying my childhood was a good childhood. We didn't have any money, but I was waking up, going to school. I was in school. My teachers were from all over the world. My friends were from all over. Sure, it wasn't a private elite institution, but it was safe, and we were there for the for good reasons. And then after school, playing baseball with friends outside.
Yep.
And then at the night, maybe some video games, maybe watching the baseball game, and then the next day do it all over again. And that was
The
my.
thing is, like, but you didn't know the difference.
I didn't know the difference. That was that bubble that we were talking about, and
Yeah.
and people and families, they want to, they look at their kids, they love their kids, they want them to feel safe, to feel good, and I love that example. I actually didn't even put it. You put it together for me, which is the concept of parents wanting their children to have that and have that safety, even in communities that are that are poor, or even in communities that don't have a lot of income. They want them to feel safe. But then there comes a time where if you want to say, make more money, change income brackets, you need to an extent throw them into the world and bring them to this. And then there's a data, and I'm looking at you business leaders now hearing this, and recruiters and HR folks and people with power. What happens is that transition is extremely difficult. There's so many, just this summer I was reading the stories of some, of first gen students in a podcast of Michael Lewis, who wrote the Blind Side and the Big Short. Incredible writer, Michael Lewis, from Oakland, and he has a podcast called Against the Rules, and it was all about coaching and mentoring. And he did a few episodes on first gen students, and in them it was heartbreaking stories of first gen students that they would take. And I'm first gen. I'm first in my family to graduate a college, and first in my nuclear family to graduate high school. And these students did incredible in high school, and it's just heartbreaking stories of sometimes they didn't know they can apply to these schools, and even when they did, there was so many that struggled in the airports to take a plane, and some stayed in their layovers, and it just these incredible stories that seem kind of surreal. And so the transition is really, really hard. It's hard. But then what happens is when you break through that transition, and we support these students through this transition, guess what? These are going to be some of the most talented people out there. If you want to talk about capitalism, you want smart people that are hardworking and that have been through a lot. Think about those first gen students. Think about what they've gone through, and the toil, and the way they navigate relationships. We have this huge untapped talent, and it's it is people like me. It's people that have been through these experiences that I went through with my father, and my experiences growing up, and go on to then navigate themselves in places like Babson and Boston. I mean, if you're first gen student of color and then you navigate Boston successfully, I can't think of, that's just that's Olympic gold medal right there. That
Well, you know what? And I'll even throw that other element to it. So it's funny. Sorry. So we like I did a speech at last summer. There's like 600 kids under between junior high school and high school students, all first gen. It was amazing. It was so cool to be amongst so many first gen kids. And the stories I would tell of growing up, the room was yep. I'm like, oh look, it hasn't changed at all for any of us. First gens are first gens, no matter what year you were born. What we go through is pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Doctor, lawyer, engineer, education, family first, clear as can be. I remember where I'm having tough time learning this, getting the English language right. I'm having a tough time. Something's wrong. My dad's like, I don't care what you do without lying, stealing, cheating, killing, or hurting yourself. You're getting an A. Struggling, frustrating, loving learning, not enjoying learning, but I love to learn. Hated the school setting. When I was applying for my MBA, after I was a teacher, a radio producer, a television producer, press secretary to a governor, I'm applying for my MBA. Oh, did you know you were dyslexic? I'm like, what?
Well,
In my 30s, finding that out. And everyone's like, well, how the hell did you make it with all these accolades and then you succeeded? I'm like, there was no choice. My parents came here for the American dream, for their children, and there was no choice to fail. It was an option. And so you figure it out. And so when you just said, we're here to succeed, we're here to grow, and we're here to take on every opportunity, and we're hungry. And I always say the Haitian hustle is alive. We're here because we're not told any different.
Yeah. No, it's true. You know, I mean, expectations are really interesting in the immigrant community. There was a tweet. I'm trying to catch it again. It's going to be, it's really interesting. It's from the writer Anand Gridahara. So I'm probably misspelling his name, but he's the mispronouncing. But he wrote the book Winner Take All. I'm not sure if he wrote that, part of that book. Another book reference a lot of.
I will add that to my list because I have not thought about that book.
Winner Take All. He has a great tweet. Look at this tweet, and it puts everything into context. I think it's a little funny. It says, every Indian American is about to become even more disappointing to their parents.
100%. 100%. Remember, none of us are at their level until someone says, oh my God, your child is so fabulous. And then you're like, let someone else tell them, because we can't say it and they don't see it yet. But the second someone else on the outside sees it, they're like, good job. When they're older and there's grandchildren, yeah, they'll give you some taps on the back and say like, good job, but not until, because they want more from you.
It's getting higher and higher for me. That's great news.
All right, so we can talk about this for a longer period of time, but I really want to get towards your business because you were raised this way. What was your major in school, and walk me through your the jobs that you've had to get to the company that you've built.
Yeah, I mean, I drank the Kool-Aid as a kid around corporate America, and I followed that, and then I found out they had no diversity, and it was very disappointing to come to that realization. Very, very disappointing. I can't even tell you. It's shocking, and but at the same time, I had faith that things could be better. And
wait, so I want you to go back, because when you're saying drinking the Kool-Aid, like, what do you mean?
Well, like this idea that, you should, that I could be in 20 years, work 20 years, 30 years at a big bank in Wall Street, just become a partner, retire, and that's it. And that's your life. But I think a lot of times, and this happens when you're underrepresented and you realize that there's challenges that we face as a country. You kind of realize that, and then you kind of find your calling. I mean, I think that's that word is very dramatic, but you know what I'm trying to say. So for me, that was kind of that, and it was when I was in corporate America and my short stints, my internships there, noticing that you look at the board, you look at the leaders, and you're like, wait a second, none of these people look like my uncle, and it was like, and they should, he's a good guy. So, and then that's where we started doing the work of diversity and inclusion training, helping businesses with their diversity and inclusion and diversity and training education. And we haven't stopped, and we've expanded and we've evolved with the company. The company's name is Forefront. We started with just training, and now we are even expanding to digital resources. In particular, we build chatbots that provide training, and a lot of that training, the chatbot training, is focused on just like I started this interview, on providing the resources that the next generation needs and young people need to succeed in these jobs. So we see it as twofold. We need to educate and expand awareness within leaders, but we also need to provide the resources directly in people's hands, whether that's resume review, LinkedIn review, mock interviews, so they can be successful in attaining employment and navigating these circles in corporate America. And so that's a big focus of Forefront.
So walk me through. So I'm a company. Am I a large? Am I a small? I mean, like, who am I as a company or business? Yeah. And then once I've decided to engage with you, who am I engaging with on your team, and how does it work?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we've worked with big companies as big as Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts or SAP or Accenture, to very smaller companies and even in nonprofits as well. So we've been, interestingly enough, have had that dynamic, and I think part of it is because a lot of times the budgets are, let's just say it this way, I think that businesses should come to understand that diversity and inclusion is a priority and invest in it. But unfortunately, that's not always the mindset. So due to that, only sometimes disposable income is what is invested in these efforts. And disposable income is not really found anywhere in the world except in Fortune 500 companies sometimes. so that's where a lot of the investment is, and we've got a lot of that investment from that. But at the same time, the interest is sometimes higher with smaller organizations and nonprofits, even though the budgets are less, right? So it's really an interesting dynamic, and that's why it's kind of been both. We've had all these different partners because the interest and the money doesn't always align and pulls us in different directions between very big companies and smaller companies and organizations. In terms of the product, we, like, at the beginning, it was very straightforward, different diversity and training. We still do that training virtually. We still do those workshops. In terms of our technology, we build our digital training is focused via chatbot. So the same way you might text me or text a friend, you can text a chatbot that we built for you and go through a training experience. And that can be focused on diversity and inclusion training, but that can also focus on career coaching and getting access to resume review, LinkedIn review, and those resources. And that's a really great intervention, because with COVID-19 and the coronavirus, everyone's virtual. So we've gotten a lot of traction in having organizations hire us to build these chatbots for them. And they get to change the name of the chatbot. They get to have control of the chatbot and use those chatbots to provide training to their people anywhere, anytime. 3 a.m, you can text your chatbot and you have a conversation. And for us, it's an equity issue. We've always been about equity and about diversity and inclusion. And this is an incredible intervention. We really feel that getting people the hands of coaching in their fingertips is an incredible intervention, and it's needed because now you can't meet in person. And even when you can, right behind you have a beautiful photo of the Commons. And I think that's the big building in downtown Boston. That Prudential. So not everybody can get to the Prudential meeting for a mentoring session with a corporate executive. And why? Because they have 3 jobs, because they maybe can't afford the tea, etc. It's equity. Some of the same reasons why young people can't go to some of these out-of-state schools. So now let's have that in mind, and let's provide the resources where they are. And then we're going to be able to create more diversity and inclusion. So that's another intervention. We're very excited about that intervention. And, to put it into context, maybe that intervention might be even better than working with our current leaders and educating them, because, maybe there's limits there, and maybe we can, work up instead of down. We'll see. We're just one of the many incredible organizations doing this work. And you've been doing this work of driving diversity in Boston and beyond. So I'm so glad to be part of this greater community that is doing so much incredible work. That Black Economic Groups of Boston, Amplify Latinx, so many, so much work to do, though, said.
So I have to say, all right, so one, it's the John Hancock. I should have just like
John Hancock. No,
I was like, Prudential is there, but like it's the John Hancock, the tallest one. So so I had to clarify that one.
Yes.
I know where I know my city, so I should like be very clear.
No, we would have been off air.
But people were like, I go, what do you mean? Do you not know where you live? What's going on here? I have to say that, and it's definitely going to lead me to my next a few questions. Is that, I mean, so I'm going to be full of, I don't do the diversity like you do. I walk in a room. I walk in a room and I literally show you by what I do and what I say in regards to my career, the individuals I associate with, the people that I bring to the table. I just do it organically because this is the way I was raised. It's just the person that I am. I always do have to scratch my head sometimes. We're like, really, Boston? Are we still being made fun of by every single comedian in town all over the country? Seriously? So I'm constantly scratching my head, but I'm like, you know what? I cannot change a community, but I can change myself and what I bring to that community. And so that's one of the things where I do love what everyone is doing in regards of getting more attention to the Boston area. But I always remind people where Boston is a small area that I've worked in it, but my career has been Massachusetts and New England. And if you go to Watertown, the Armenians, you go to New Bedford area, you have the Cape Verdeans. If you have you have all your pockets of clear cultures that I've always been part of because I have friends in all these different areas. And so when I'm in Boston, I forget how Boston, the city where people work, the diversity conversation is very, very raw still being worked on. But I always just try to remind people when they come here, especially the students, if you're looking for something and if you're looking for people that are like you, they are here in Massachusetts. Are they all in the same area? No. But guess what? If you're in New York, they're not all in the same area as well. New York is just seen more as like a big, huge melting pot versus Massachusetts is not, because the stigma of Massachusetts has been long and hard, and that messaging hasn't changed in quite some time. So I that's why I love what you're doing. But to add layers to this conversation is during the pandemic, you're seeing everyone home. Like everyone is home. Everyone is no longer having that conversation about diversity until Black Lives Matters happen. And then you see all the companies changing. So what did Black Lives Matters as well as the pandemic do for your company? And what did you add or what did you pull back on? Like how did the company advance because of the pandemics that we had going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's I do think that there has been a shift in greater conscious around some of these issues being real. A lot of people, for a long time maybe didn't think that there was a lack of inclusion or diversity in American universities, business, etc. And I think that the murder of George Floyd really amplified it even more and kind of brought even more consolidation around that. I hate to even think it's an idea, but for some people it's an idea. When I think it's a fact that you just have to look at the numbers. When we look at whether that's police brutality or all the way to maybe a more white collar issue with a lack of diverse leaders in corporate America. So I think that there's been a shift and a continued shift, which is good for organizations that are doing the work. There's definitely no doubt. That said, with just like, I always say what we see, what we're seeing, and we definitely cannot take anything for granted. In fact, it's become really clear that we need to double down and work even harder. I think that we need to when it comes to working for respect and working for equity.
I'm going to pull back not pull back, but I'm going to push back in regards of what did the pandemic do for you? Well, your company, I mean, you are a founder of this company. You could have worked anywhere. I mean, like, you're a smart person. You could have worked anywhere. You have a great education. You start this company. It's doing very well. We're in a pandemic. I mean, March, you start hearing the rumblings of it. And then all of a sudden in the summer, it's like a full blown out pandemic #2. How did it help your company? Did it hurt your company? Did you add more services to your company? How did it evolve your business and your team?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that we should talk about diversity and inclusion in a market perspective, but yes, there is more demand due to a higher conscious, but that we do see more people paying attention. But at the same time, the point that I was going back to is that at the same time you have, I'm forgetting the name of the company. I wish I had it in my back pocket, but there's certain companies, and I believe it's one of the tech companies in San Francisco that at the same time responded to this by saying that, hey, we're going to be apolitical and that we're not going to bring any of these conversations into our world. So, every time that you have a force of change and a force of positive change, anytime you eat a salad for lunch, sometimes you have a burger for dinner. The US did that. And now maybe we're going back to a salad, but with that brings a lot of challenges. So yeah, demand is higher, but it's still the road ahead for businesses that do diversity and inclusion is shaky, because what we're dealing with is a massive problem. And quite frankly, the budgets of diversity and inclusion leaders needs to be exponentially higher. We've had trainings that a few weeks ago, a few months ago, with some of the issues that maybe at a national level things were going to be canceled. Diversity training was going to be canceled. That was a real threat, so and it's still alive today. So that's what I'm saying. That's how our business is impacted. Conscious is higher, but at the same time, the messiness that we're dealing with in our market and doing work that is focused on inclusion and equity is still in question.
So could I say that this is a fad? I mean, could some people say that it's a fad? Because I mean, I had a conversation with my cousin he was on the podcast, and we were discussing what's the difference between, like, during the summer when Black Lives Matters and all these different things that were happening, but in February, those things were happening in February as well. What was that difference? What was the escalator? And now we're going into, people were saying it today, like right now we're so focused on the numbers of who's going to be president that people are forgetting we're still in a pandemics. So all of a sudden it's not the discussion at all. It's no longer on the table. So does it become a fad where, during the summer we're talking about it, we're going back into locking down everyone, countries closing down. So is that a concern?
It's exactly what I said. We give ourselves permission to behave badly sometimes after we did something good, and it's a phenomenon. It's actually a phenomenon of theory, and that's what I said. If you have a salad, then you have a burger for dinner. We as a society, we say, hey, we elected Ayanna Pressley, so we eliminated racism. It doesn't work that way. You know what I mean? So George Floyd happened, so I put a statement that Black Lives Matter, and we ended the lack of diversity in our corporate boards. No, that's not
the amount of emails that went through the companies that I just even forgot that I even subscribed to, and all the emails. But then you saw the CEO and the founder getting in trouble because they did something else. But I'm like, didn't you not just put a statement out last week?
I think it was my co-founder Yulkendi who said, this is like obesity. It doesn't go away. It's a consistent problem. It's massive. Yeah. We need to see it that way. But the thing is, I guess it goes against human nature, and it goes against almost American nature, because American, maybe it's almost like John Wayne complex. We look at things, we solve them, and it's over. Mm-hmm. And we're good, and we celebrate, and we have a beer. No, this is so far from that. Yeah. This is not going anywhere.
So what do we do? What
do we do?
If you're looking for a company, but no, if you're a company and you honestly, there are companies that are just oblivious. I mean, like we believe, the HR team believes that we're doing something right. And there are companies who are like, we're fine. So what would be one or two things that you'd say to do right now? Because everyone is home. They're assuming, hey, everyone's home, everyone's fine. There's no one that's being like criticized or things like that. But you're like, you're right here. You're even closer than you were if you were next to me. So what would you say to any company of any size in regards of what are steps that they should start thinking about to start changing their narrative?
I mean, there's a million things you could do.
I just want 2 or 3. We have a smaller window.
Be transparent around your numbers. What are the demographics of your leadership team? What are the demographics of your board? Show that more publicly. Show the trends over time, right? Invest in community-based organizations and community-based efforts around education and access to resources around the topics that I was talking about 30 minutes ago. You know, it's unbelievable that, you have a student that maybe goes to, a particular school, Boston Latin, then somebody goes to school across the street, but only one has access to resume prep, LinkedIn prep, a mentor. How can we actually bring those resources across both streets? How can we see education as something that everybody should have access to in this country? And then, it depends on what you're looking at. If you're looking at hiring, you should investigate what is your current process. We talk about a lot, what is tradition, right? And what should be tradition and what shouldn't be. Just because we do things this way and it's a tradition and it's a preference and we hire from Harvard, should we continue to do that? Can we look at other schools, right? Is it okay that we have a senior leader, CEO that has an accent? Oh, you know what? It's a terrible idea. We're not going to have a CEO of an accent because market share is going to go down. Well, I didn't know that, so we need to have these tough conversations and speak to each other and create a space for each other. So those are some small things that you could do. Expand your budgets as well when it comes to these efforts, because actually I was having a call with this. Companies, they think so short term. They think about a lot of times, they think short term, like, next quarter, this, that. Well, if you always think about next quarter, and when we build a society where we're so divided and no one wants to talk to each other, there's going to be no next quarter, and it's going to come by knocking at your front door, and it is, and we saw a lot of that this year. So, or these times, so it's those are some things that come to mind.
Those are perfect. Those are absolutely perfect. Gonna wheel it back to you again. What have you been doing during this time? I mean, like, we are in a pandemic. We are pandemics. I mean, so economic, we'll call it the disease, as well as human anger, the Black Lives Matters. I mean, we have 2020 has fed us pandemics. How are you doing? How were you when it started? You are the head of a company, and you are someone that clearly loves his family, takes care of his family. So where are you at with all of this that's going on?
Well, nobody knows because you can't tell. I want to quickly mention a reference to the company that I mentioned that took a political stance and say we're not going to talk about these issues. It's Coinbase in San Francisco. The CEO said we're not going to talk about these issues. I believe immediately after that, 5% took a severance package that was offered, and we're going to see. Hopefully, we're not going to see a lot of companies do this. With the trends say otherwise, they say that companies are becoming more and more socially active, which is good. We need that, because I always talk about it. We want companies to have a bigger influence in society and take bigger of a role, and then we're going to have them ignore social issues. Then that doesn't make sense. But I wanted to mention that, and it's very disappointing with Coinbase and saying we're not going to talk about issues and social issues in our company. So wanted to mention that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So then, in terms of what I'm doing personally, So I'm in New York. Particularly in Long Island, New York. And before this, I was living in Manhattan, in Inwood, and when the pandemic hit, I had this lifestyle where I was traveling all over the world, all over the U.S. mostly, sometimes abroad, doing workshops, conferences, business. And then when this hit, I haven't traveled outside of New York since. And I even moved from the city to the suburbs. And it's really funny. I think in a nutshell, I've realized how automatic my life was before this, and I realized that I didn't really need all that travel to be happy, and I didn't even make time for myself. I wasn't working out. I was unhealthy. I was getting a gut. I wasn't even realizing who I am. I think that hopefully, I hope that a lot of people had realizations like I did, and hopefully, with this, crazy disease, this virus, and disease, the coronavirus, have allowed people to reflect and look at themselves in the mirror, and not literally, but for me, it was more exercise. It was realizing I didn't need all this travel and have a stronger relationship with myself, and I definitely have. And that's manifested in so many ways. One of them that is pretty cool is working out. I've been working out now for 2.5 months, but people won't recognize me when this is over anymore.
Well, it's so funny because I only know you like this, so I don't know what you look like during, but I only know you like this. And so I'm like, I don't know what that means, but I came back from my travels as well, where I'm always fit. The second I get into the hotel, I go right to the gym, and I have a routine. I go for runs, and then I made bread, I made brownies, I made I was baking, I was cooking, and I was like eating. I was eating healthy, but I was eating a lot because I wasn't exercising it off. And then I got bored. I got bored with drinking. I got bored with eating all the brownies. I got bored. And then all of a sudden, all the weight came off, and I'm back to being me. And I'm like, oh, I'm good now. I'm good. So if you look at podcasts at the beginning, there's a little bit more of me that was there.
Yeah, well, I've always been skinny, but now I'm working out to get a little bit more, bulky, feel better about myself. It's all about different things for different people. Another thing is I'm much more invested in music. I love music. It's a huge passion, and movies too. But especially I feel music, and I wake up and for me, like I'm 95 years old, so you wake up and you're like, oh my God, you're 95, and you haven't dedicated any time to these passions.
Mm-hmm.
This pandemic was incredible because I might have realized those things when I was 150. Instead, I realized them when I was 95, which is great. So now when I'm 150, I can look back and say, hey, I took care of myself and me. So that's something. I think the pandemic is here. It's going to be here for a while more.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't found anything new about yourself, or did more self-love activities, I hope you have a good excuse for it.
You know what? I love that you just answered it before me asking the question, because I have like 2 more short questions to go. Because I know I've used so much of your time. But yes, if you're not using this time well, what are you doing? Because everyone should have a 2020 story.
Even if it's sleeping,
it should be powerful. It should be amazing.
Yeah, that works. That counts.
Mm-hmm.
Sleeping is productive. If you say, hey, when the pandemic hit, I just just stayed in bed the whole time, even for Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
If that's what you needed, that's good. I do think that American society is hyper saturated in activity and news and everything. And obviously we've had a disease that taken the lives of our loved ones, of so many people. And there, I cannot say, oh my God, take advantage of this time, when literally, something so bad like death or the disease has maybe you have dealt with that. I want to take those people, put them in a different category. But if you're home and you're just home, this is a great opportunity, because American society is so 24/7, and that was mine, and now it's paused, and I've got some beautiful gifts from that pause. And then the other thing is that everything is virtual now. A lot of things are virtual, not everything, but a lot more things are virtual.
Yeah.
So you could do whatever that evil plan you have to take over the world. You could really do it from home too.
I'm just laughing because I'm like, I say to people all the time, world domination is harder than I thought, but I'm going to get there.
Well, yeah. So your world domination plans should, are possible from home now, is what I'm saying. Maybe maybe in 10 years from now would have been a little harder. 15, 20, definitely 30, 40. So there's a lot of damage that you can do in whatever space.
Yeah.
Oh, I design. I'm a fashion designer. I'm a marketer. I'm a music producer. I'm a business consultant. You can do those things from home somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's nothing that we can't figure out because, I mean, remember, Jeff Bezos was in his garage. And so think about that right there. 10 years ago, 11 years ago, when the world imploded last time, there was Amazon, but not like Amazon today.
Yeah.
All right. So I have my last question for you, my very last question for you. If you had this went by really fast. Oh my God, this went by so fast. If you had a personal ask and a professional ask of anyone that's listening to you right now, what would be your personal ask and what would be your professional ask?
My personal ask is to have conversations with people that disagree with you, and that you don't understand, or who you're confused about, who maybe you're angry at, and listen to them, talk to them. I do think that one of the things that's a big challenge right now, I do think that, hey, look, it's the concept of cancel culture. If you did something inappropriate and you did something wrong, I always say, we're not going to withstand any BS. Harvey Weinstein is a bad person, but instead of spending time on Harvey Weinstein, let's have a conversation about the system and where we might disagree. And let me not cancel you because you have a different view than me, right? So let's speak to people who have different views than us, and let's listen to them. And let's be careful of where we might be canceling people. And instead, let's have a conversation. I'm going to do that a lot more. And then professionally, for the business leaders, this goes back to my early point of these incredible first generation people and talent that are going through hell to get from New York to Boston, like me, and the skills they've picked up that make them incredible people. Instead of looking at them and doing it like tradition is a resume, an interview. Let's rethink the format, the way that the criteria, and let's give some points for the hardships that make these people brilliant. And let's look and let's redefine how we hire, how we invest in companies. And you're going to notice you're going to be investing in incredible leaders from all backgrounds, and that's going to drive diversity up. And then, like I said, if you have a salad for lunch, have it for dinner. If you do something good, don't pat yourself in the back and think it's all over.
I love those answers so much. I mean, that was so good. Oh my God, this was so much fun. And the thing is, I tell because people always ask me, they're like, how do you format the podcast? I'm like, I have 7 questions, and it's the same 7 questions for everyone. And everyone's like, really? I'm like, there are times that I get through all 7. There are times that I don't, because the conversation goes in a different direction. I'd rather it go into a different direction. And that's one of the things that I learned when I was in the media from the host, the Maddie in the Morning, Matt Siegel. He taught me, he's like, find those questions that engage and don't rush to get to the questions, because this conversation was so much better than any of the questions I could have asked. I kind of put a couple of in there, but you answered them before I even said it. So this was beautiful.
Thank you. No, really, I really appreciate it. And the time and, the opportunity to have with all of you. We mentioned some books, some the Michael Lewis podcast, Against the Rules, and then Announce book, Winners Take All, is a good book. And then this concept of staying with your eye on the ball and realizing that diversity is a work that we're going to be doing for the end of time. I recommend Malcolm Gladwell's podcast, Revisionist History, in particular, the first episode ever of that podcast.
Well, you know what? I'm going to say it's good that you recommended the books. but I'm going to say, and what I'm going to repeat what you said, which I love the most, and that's what I'm going to end this conversation with, is that take that time and take the time to talk to people that are talking different, like that have different thoughts than you. And with the right person, you will have a really great conversation. You don't have to agree with them to have a conversation with them. And I'm with you. I'm 120% against cancel culture. If I can't make a mistake and I can't learn from it, what's the point? What's the point? And I'm totally 100% against the whole entire, what's it called? Imposter syndrome, because guess what? I belong everywhere I need to be, because once I'm there, I will do well, because that's what I was never told I couldn't. And so all these little things are being dropped into this world, and people are working so hard, and they're being canceled. They're being told that they don't belong here. We all belong somewhere, and we all can do very well, given the opportunity to have the conversations with the right people like you.
Thank you. No, it's really a pleasure.
Thank you. I appreciate so much. I appreciate your time. And at the start of next year, I'm going to come back with and talk to everyone to see what was the end of the year like? What does it look like for your company? So I look forward to coming back and talking to you and hearing exactly what happens next.
Yes, no, absolutely. No, I really appreciate it. There's a lot of work to do, a lot of work to do. And I know that's a big word, but it's so true.
Honestly, there's a lot of work to do, and we're taking steps to do that. So I do appreciate it. And I can't wait to talk to you again. But I mean,
Thank you so much.